Hey everyone, so welcome to the Book of Ruth. I'm going to guess that you're all settled in nice and cozy in somebody's living room at some point in time. Hopefully you got yourself a good cup of coffee, and we are about to launch into this fabulous study of one of the most engaging narratives I know of in the Old Testament. So it's time for some introductions. You might be sitting there saying, who is this strange woman on the screen? And let me tell you who the strange woman on the screen is. My name is Sandra Richter. I am currently a professor of Old Testament at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California. Some of us have to suffer for the cause. In fact, I'm actually the Robert H. Gundry Chair of Biblical Studies at Westmont College. Are you impressed? You'll get over it. Okay. My background is that I have taught at Asbury Theological Seminary, which is the home of Seedbed Studios. I taught at Wheaton College and at Wesley Biblical. And if you were to search me in a database, you would find out that I am this very odd mix of a scholar who's deeply committed to excellence in the discipline of my guild, and a teacher who is deeply committed to bring in this great story to the everyday, average believer, seeker, student of the Bible. So what we're going to be doing for the next 6 weeks is kind of integrating the two of these. There'll be a lot of information that you might not have access to on your own because of the biblical studies part of me, but hopefully the teacher side of me is going to make this accessible and engaging, and you will be thrilled with the narrative that we're going to deal with. So, of all of the narratives I could have chosen, and of all of the stories that we could have decided to study, you might be asking, why in the world did we choose the Book of Ruth? And there are 3 reasons for it. The first one is that the Book of Ruth is simply a great story. This is a story about a family who's going through the highs and lows, the griefs, the losses, the successes that every family experiences over the course of its life. And like any great epic, the characters of this book just grab us. They grab our hearts, and they compel us to get invested. I think of one of my personal favorite novels. You might have read it. It's Taylor Caldwell's Answer as a Man, and it's a story about the Irish immigrants coming into New York City. And by the time you're done with that book, you are so invested in this family that you can hardly put the book down or separate yourself from the characters. Or I think about one of my daughter's favorites, Laura Ingalls' Little House on the Prairie, that has captured generations of readers, and it's the same kind of gig. That here is a family that is experiencing gains and losses that are shaping their lives, and you as the reader become so intertwined with their story that you have trouble putting that book down. Or I think of one of my husband's favorite epic novels, The Godfather, yeah? If I leave that man alone for a weekend, I can be guaranteed that Godfather 1, 2, and 3 are going to be rented from the public library, and he's going to go through that story again. That's what the Book of Ruth is. It is a great story. And so by the time the narrator is done with us, we are so invested in Ruth and Naomi. We are so injured by their losses. We are so hopeful for their successes. We find ourselves looking at Ruth in the field and Boaz, the great champion, standing on the side, and we are hoping and praying with everything in us that he will see in this young Moabite woman exactly what we see. And by the time that that baby is finally placed in Naomi's lap, and her wrinkled old hands have a chance to rock that baby boy, we find ourselves in tears of joy that all of her losses have finally been reversed. So one reason we're doing this book is it's just a great story. That's reason 1. Reason number 2 is not only is a great story, but it is a story about people who are facing real life with all of its pain, real life with all of its inconsistencies, with all of its confusion. And in the everyday circumstances of that very real life, they choose integrity every time. Ruth, and Ruth in many ways is a foil of Boaz. Ruth is our outsider. She's got nothing. She has no wealth, she has no influence, she has no voice. She essentially is an illegal immigrant who has snuck over the border to work as a day laborer in the grain fields. And she's an outsider. She's a foreigner. And she's a foreigner of the sort that the people of Israel consider her the other. Now, all of us have got an other in our lives. All of us were raised with some category of people that we avoid. And we're going to avoid all the politically correct categories for a moment and pause and think about who the real other is in our lives, because we've all got one. And Ruth was that girl. So she is the total outsider. Boaz, on the other hand, is the complete insider. Such an insider that we could even describe him as a little bit of a good old boy, if we wanted to. He lives in a small town. He's very wealthy. He's very influential. When he speaks, people listen. And yet both of these people, the one who has everything and the one who has nothing, are described by our narrator with the same adjective. And in Hebrew, it's the word chayil. You can practice that for a moment. Turn to your neighbor. Say chayil. Good, yeah. If there's a little bit of spit on that H, you got it right. Chayil. Now it's a Hebrew word, and it is often used for select warriors. In fact, the judges of the Old Testament, who we're going to be studying before too much longer, are described as Giborim Chayil. So it can be a warrior. It can be a very strong government. It can be a very wealthy person. In other words, it's somebody or something that has power. That's what Chayil is. And in this story, the Hebrew reader is struck from the get-go that both Ruth, the one who has nothing, and is the complete outsider, is described as a woman of Chayil, and Boaz, the insider, who many of us would anticipate is corrupt because of his insider status, right? Isn't it easy to be blind to the marginalized if you've never been uncomfortable in your life? Isn't it easy to stroke the back of the one who strokes yours? And yet over and over again, both of these characters are described as people of Chayil. Both of these people are people who show profound and exceptional integrity in the way they live their lives. We're interested in that. Yes, we are. The challenging account of everyday lives lived with extraordinary integrity. People who demonstrate to us throughout the book what it means to live life with rigorous honesty, self-sacrifice, hard work, and kindness. The Bible will speak of this sort of person as someone who is faithful in little and therefore faithful in much. Ruth and Boaz are these people. The third reason that I chose this book has to do with canonical context. Now there's a big word for you. What in the world does canonical mean? Well, it has to do with the word canon, which is the word that we use when we're speaking about the collection of books that have found their way into the Bible. So when I use the word canon, I mean Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Matthew, Mark, Luke. The books that the people of faith over the millennia have said, these belong in the Bible. Well, obviously the content of the canonical books is important, right? We're learning from them. But a surprise to you, perhaps, is that the order of the canonical books is important as well. And the book of Ruth comes right after the book of Judges in the Christian canon. And the book of Judges, well, it's a book that most Christians don't read very much. It very rarely makes the top 10 list. One of the reasons it doesn't make the top 10 list is it's way back there in the Old Testament. And who reads the Old Testament anyway? I'm going to so get you over that. But the other reason is that if somebody were to direct a movie on the book of Judges, they would have to rate that movie at least R, and perhaps even a bit further. Because the book of Judges is all about a description of the people of God during one of their most corrupt eras of history. The book is full of corruption, political intrigue, It's full of murder. It's full of kidnapping, rape, abuse. It's an ugly book. And it's an ugly book because it's a description of the people of God when they were living in a fashion that was pretty darn ugly. And in the midst of this book, where, as we'll read before we're done, an Israelite girl was not safe on the streets of her own town. In this book, where even the Levites, the professional priests, were on the take. In this book, where you could expect to be kidnapped, murdered, raped if you went out alone by the people of God, right after the book of Judges comes the story of Ruth. And what that tells us is that even in this most corrupt of eras, there was a man named Boaz who was not willing to allow that type of behavior on his watch. He might not have had a huge circle of influence, but the circle of influence he had, he was going to use. And how was he going to use it? He was going to stand up to his community. He was going to stand up to their stereotypes. He was going to stand up to their bigotry. And he was going to say, not on my watch. And so when a young woman comes from Moab, and let me tell you, the Moabites are the other in Israel's experience. A young woman who no one would have expected integrity from, and even if she had shown it, they wouldn't have believed it. A young woman who everyone expected to be that girl. In that story, when she shows up and she starts demonstrating her chayil, her character, her integrity, Boaz steps forward and says, that one is seeking shelter. And you know what shelter she's seeking? She's seeking shelter under the wings of the God of Israel. And I, as a man who belongs to the God of Israel, I'm going to make sure she gets it. So that is the third reason I've chosen this book. It is a beautiful foil of what can happen within the community of faith and what should happen in the community of faith. And this man will stand up for the defenseless widow. This man will make sure that she has what she needs. He will use his political currency and his resources, putting them on the line for her behalf, even if she's a Moabitess. So this is the story of Ruth, the girl from Moab, and this is the topic of our study. So how do these seedbed studies work? Well, this study will last for 6 weeks, including this gathering tonight. It revolves around a set of 6 brief videos, hopefully 25, at the most 30 minutes. You will gather with your group for 6 of these studies with me. Your group will meet, they'll watch the video without making fun of my hair. Yes. I'll end each session with a launch question, and your leader will help carry the conversation and the study forward. The second component of the study is an actual study guide that will go home with each member. Now, there'll be 3 studies for each week, and those 3 studies we're hoping are not too much, too little, but you know what? Homework isn't actually required for this study. So if you never even crack the cover of your study guide, you get back here to this gathering all the same. If you find that it is indeed a help to you, oh, that would thrill our souls, because we've worked really hard to make this study guide accessible, especially to those of you who don't have a lot of church background. We're hoping to bridge that gap and make your Bible accessible to you. So you will have the video gathering. You'll have the study guide for your time individually at home, and each of our gatherings together are going to end with a launch question. So our launch question, and don't do it just yet, is to turn to the person to your left, tell them your name, 2 pieces of information about you that you think they might find interesting, and why you decided to join this group. So this is the study of the book of Ruth. Let the adventure begin.